Hello and welcome. My name is Ross from the Britain's Hidden History Project, where we're looking to promote, amongst other things, a lot of the work of Wilson and Blackett, who've really uncovered things from our past, British past, all the way back to ancient Egypt and the connections. And one of the things I've got the great honour and privilege and pleasure of doing is speaking a lot with Mr. Wilson and Mr. Blackett and going through a lot of the research, much of which has never been published. So as you'll see, I'm going through a lot of their notes. I'm going to try and edit this together and produce more books, which will be available as soon as possible. And one of the areas that Alan in particular has written a lot about is ancient Egypt. And from this we can take a lot of messages about the foundation of Christianity, how the religion worked, what the pyramids were for, which is a really fascinating subject I'm going to get on to soon, how the gods worked, all sorts of stuff. And one of the things we'll emphasise before I go any further is this is by no means meant to be an attack on Christianity or anything like that. And I know Alan, we speak about this. He's very keen as well to make that clear. His belief is that, particularly in Britain, Christianity is actually dying out a bit, really. The churches are empty and being sold. I'm a member of a church and we pick up members from other churches. So it's not about that. His view is very much that when a lot of the mystique and sort of mysticism that was added a lot during the medieval times, when Christianity was being introduced, and we get back to the more pure message and the origins of the religion and how it works, it would actually be a godsend, literally, to revive interest. And here you'll see some of the notes. And these drawings hand done by Mr. Blackett, Byram Blackett, as he appears on the books. And something I want to say about him as well, he gets criticism from some places and doesn't get anything like the recognition he deserves. While Alan's undoubtedly the genius who's got insight and can crack a lot of these things, Byram is very much an equal partner in this project. He does a lot of the filing, the heavy research. He looks into stuff, he finds things, he comes up with ideas. A lot of the stuff Alan sold to me, this was his idea. He said, hey, why don't we go and look at this? Why don't we see if we can read the hieroglyphics using the Welsh language, the Cymroglyphics covered in Moses in the Hieroglyphs book, and book I've got coming out as well, based on their research. Also, I didn't realise before, he actually bankrolled a lot of the early work that they did. He had a successful business. And I see them together, and he does a lot of the caring and looking after Alan as well. So he deserves a lot more recognition than he gets. So this is the sort of notes most of it is in. Unfortunately, it's hand-typed, handwritten, hand-drawn, and all of it's going to need transcribing and entering into digital formats so we can use it and edit it and lay it out and all make it a little bit more presentable for use in books. So bear with us while we do that. There is a website, Britain's Hidden History, all the details, and a Facebook group where these things are discussed. So please join in. Inputs required and questions. It's all good stuff. So one of the subjects, a lot of it is done in almost like essays, which will form chapters of the book at some point. And here's one I thought I'd share as an example, rather than make everyone wait too long. And this is called The Names of God. And I'll just read directly from the notes I have here from Wilson and Blackett. So I hope you enjoy this. And here we go. The Names of God, Wilson and Blackett. As the pharaohs of Egypt all had no less than 5 ceremonial names, it is interesting to note that the God of the Hebrews invented, or at least introduced, by Moses, also had multiple names and multiple personalities. So like Pharaoh, the God of Moses had different manifestations. Just as with the Egyptian priests, so the God of Moses is lauded with different praiseworthy attributes by the later prophets, scribes and judges. However, to deal with his various names and titles first, there are 3 Hebrew words used to express the fact of deity. These are El, spelled E-L, Elohim, which is E-L-O-H-I-M, and Adon, A-D-O-N. Now, El is the word which indicates the deity. It literally means God. This word differentiates the deities as such from ordinary mortals. Then there is the plural of the word, Elohim, which means gods. Many scholars have tried to interpret this word to not meaning gods, but the many natures, manifestations and attributes. This is generally a Christian propaganda trick to make the Bible appear to say what they wish it to say, instead of what it plainly and clearly said, or says. Elohim means gods. Then of course we come to the third appellation, the name Adon, which means God as a sovereign or Lord God. In other words, the executive God, acting with authority. So there are three nouns used to refer to God or gods. From nouns and descriptive terms we then move to another stage. There is the actual name accorded to God or one of the gods. This is of course Yahweh, later turned into Jehovah. Now much of this is well concealed in English Bible translations, where the trick of substitution has been practiced. Where Yahweh occurs, the word Lord has been put in its place. And where Yahweh occurs with Adon or Adonai, the phrase Lord God has been put into the Bible in their place. It is not impossible that much of the religious mystique sold to Western European nations would evaporate overnight if this careful doctoring of names and words were not done. Nonetheless, the God of Moses has a name, and it is Yahweh. As we shall see, this was the name of an Egyptian mountain god or storm god, and as the Exodus took place at the time of the great volcanic eruption which devastated islands in the Mediterranean, including Thera, then the choice of this god by Moses was particularly appropriate. The word Adon is also worth looking at, for the ancient Mesopotamian god of storms, rain and the weather was none other than Adad, and the great supreme god was Anu. The whole thing appears to be a joint Egyptian-Mesopotamian construction with Yahweh from Egypt and Adon or Adad from Mesopotamia. Further to this we have the fact that there was the great god of the Hurrians, and possibly the Hittites, the weather god. This god was known by the name Teshub to the Hurrians, but he is indeed their great executive god in being, and there is no gainsaying the Hebrew, Hurrian, Hittite connection. The word Yahweh has been linked to the Hebrew word for the verb to be, in the sense of being present rather than just existing. There is no guarantee that this similarity or link is correct or anything other than another convenient Christian construction to again make the Bible give a desirable meaning. Yahweh was the Egyptian mountain god. The word Yahweh is used right from the beginning of the Bible through Genesis and Exodus. There's a list of references. Genesis 4, 1-4, chapter 26, 14, 22, Exodus 3, 12, 13-16, there's various references there. The situation really gets interesting when we look at the 5 titles or ceremonial names of this god of Moses. As stated, all Egyptian pharaohs had no less than 5 title names given to them at their coronation. These names replaced the name which they had used up to the time of coronation. So let's look at Yahweh's descriptive title names in true pharaonic Egyptian style. Number 1, El Shaddai, and this is represented in Genesis 17, 1-28, 3f, and there's a number of references. Then we got 2, El Elyon, which appears in Genesis 14 and 18. The third name, El Roi, R-O-I, Genesis 16, 13. The fourth one, El Olam, O-L-A-M, Genesis 21 and 33. And the fifth, El Elohe Israel, brackets El Bethel, which is Genesis 33 and Genesis 31. Quite a collection of names for one deity and worth looking at. First, El Shaddai, which means probably the mountain. Now of all things in the land of Egypt with the pyramid building, the pyramid-shaped mountain of Mereska, towering above the Valley of Kings' burial places, and Yahweh, the mountain god, El Shaddai, the mountain god. The classic Christian argument is that the meaning is purely symbolic of strength and unchanging power. Were not all ancient gods partly symbolized and symbolic in such a way? Then we have El Elyon, meaning God Most High. This is followed by El Roy, the God of seeing. Does this mean that he sees everything? Or like Thoth, he understands and knows everything? The next title is El Olam, meaning the everlasting God, a common enough praise to a great deity. Finally, there are the titles God of Israel, El Eloha Israel, and El Bethel, the God of Bethel. The people and the area which this God patronizes are specified. There are, of course, other titles bestowed on this God. In his capacity of a war god, he is praised as the Lord of hosts many, many times in the Bible. He is also referred to as a jealous God, an insecure God, apparently for all the bombast. See Exodus 34:14. There are all sorts of various attributes paid to this God, probably similar to the praises of priests and followers of many deities. He is the judge, Osiris, Gilgamesh, the creator, Ptah, Aruru, the king, Setek, Elil, the god of all flesh, Re, Anu, and so on. So we have a rather different picture emerging of the God of Abraham, and the later different God of Moses, a seemingly multi-named, multi-personality deity. There is, however, another aspect of all this to look into, for there are other designations of the weather god to be noted in Egypt. Much very intelligent observation was done by Flinders Petrie in this respect. We noted that the name of a god, written Ash, A-S-H, was to be found on at least 5 inscriptions. So what or who was the god Ash? The major point about Ash is that out of the 5 inscriptions identified by Petrie, Ash is of foreign origin in 4 of them. The earliest inscription is on the ceilings of 2nd Dynasty wine jars. Now, the link between ash and wine and vineyards has foreign connotations. Later, in the 5th Dynasty, the god Ash is called the Lord of Tehenu, translated, the land of the olive trees. In the 6th Dynasty, the god crops up again in the pyramid texts of the pharaoh Pepi, with no clear meaning as yet deciphered. Incidentally, these are old notes before they did the deciphering of hieroglyphics. You might have more to add to this. Back to the text. Then Ash appears again in the time of the 18th Dynasty, approximately 1500 BC, in the Book of the Dead. In chapter XCV, it states, I am the terrible one of the thunderstorm. I am refreshed by this ash. Close quote. This is a strange sentence, for thunderstorms are very rare indeed in Egypt. As the foreign occupation of Egypt by the Hyksos had only ended around 1552 BC, there may be a connection. As we have identified, the Hyksos were the Hittites and other confederates, including the Hebrews, as coming from the north in Upper Turkey and from Russia and Eastern Europe. The matter of thunderstorms and therefore rain, rare in Egypt, and also vines and olives, make it clear that ash is of foreign derivation. So ash is an import into Egypt. Much later in the 26th dynasty, around 600 BC, Ash is depicted with his name alongside. He is a multi-purpose god, and the inscription confirms this, for Ash is described as Ash of many faces. The faces shown are those of a lion, a vulture, and a snake. Now, whilst a multiple-headed god is peculiar in Egypt, mixed effigies are not. Scenes of the weighing of hearts before Osiris depict quite frequently a beast with a crocodile head, a lion's forelegs, chest and neck, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus. However, Ash of the 3 heads is not all that complex. First, the lion was quite frequently shown with a man's head in the form of a sphinx. So let us think in terms of the lion head as a man's head, in fact the king's head. Next, in terms of the king's head, the royal brow was always surmounted by 2 other emblems, the vulture and the viper, later replaced by the cobra. So in effect, ash is depicting the three symbols of Pharaoh: the lion human head of the guardian sphinx, and the normal death symbols of Egypt, the royal snake and the vulture. And just to add here, if you look at their later work by Wilson and Blackett, they actually translate those things using the chiroglyphics, and you can actually understand what that message means. Back to the text. However, in common with Yahweh, Ash is the storm god. Whether Ash can be identified with Adad is conjecture, but there is clearly the element of the rain charm in the sentence from the Book of the Dead, where Ash, possibly meaning wine, refreshes the storm god. Remarkably, however, Ash turns up elsewhere, and of all places in Europe, of the year 1545 AD. One Sebastian Münster published a work entitled The Cosmographia Universalis, and among the many entries is a drawing of a god named Ash. This god is shown as a human figure wearing a mask or headdress with three heads, described as those of a lion, a toad, and a vulture. This is in fact a lion, a snake, and a vulture, just as with the Ash in Egypt. Münster explains that when the nation of the Franks were in Scythia, now Siberia, Russia, Poland, this deity Ash was called before Markomir, king of the Franks, to give advice. This is a strange situation, for lions and vultures are not native to either France or Russia, and neither are snakes particularly plentiful. The Münster narrative points to a connection with Egypt. Whether there is a connection resulting from trade or the conquest of the Hyksos period is open to question. There is, however, little doubt about the similarity of the triple identity of the god in both Russia and Egypt. The Franks or other tribes may have got the idea of this god from the head of pharaonic statues with their snake and vulture emblems on their brows, and linked the pharaoh's heads with the lion-shaped sphinx. Without doubt, Ash in this triple form is a storm god found in both Egypt and Russia, and may be associated with warmer climates such as Syria, Palestine, or Mesopotamia, in connection with wine, vines, and olives. The idea of triple identity of gods was not peculiar to Ash. The Celtic peoples had numerous ideas on the triple theme. They carved stone heads with three faces, and they depicted on their carvings many triads of gods and goddesses in their holy places. Even the God of Jesus Christ has a triple identity of Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. There is no doubt that Moses was aware of Yahweh and Ash in Egypt. Whether they are one and the same is not certain, but they do seem to have certain attributes in common. Equally, the God of Moses, who he either invented or borrowed from Egypt, was multi-named with a number of descriptive titles. Certainly when Ash is called Lord of Tehenu, land of the olive trees, in the 5th dynasty, it would certainly appear that he is the god of Syria-Palestine, brackets Canaan, close brackets. Even as late as Munster's publication in 1545 AD, Ash is shown wearing only a loincloth or kilt, which is typically Hittite or Egyptian, but hardly Russo-Siberian or European. The Hittite weather god was so important that King Merciless II left a campaign in the hands of generals to go to celebrate the god's rites at home. Ash is possibly the god of ancient Canaan, who was recognized by Abraham, and was at that time served by Melchizedek as high priest of the Most High God. The words imply that there were other gods, but this one was the most senior. Certainly Abraham refers to Yahweh at this very time, Genesis 14 verse 22. In relation to Melchizedek, the god is El Elyon, Genesis 14 verse 18. So if Yahweh equals Ash, and is El Elyon equals Yahweh equals Ash, it would certainly appear to be the case. It is worth remembering that when Abraham was supposed to have been visited by God at Mamre, Genesis 18 verse 1, he saw God in triple form. God appeared as three men to Abraham. Add to this the fact that just before this, Abraham carries out a typical Hittite sacrifice, Genesis 15 verses 9 to 11, and we begin to see the Hebrew, Hurrian, Hittite, Celtic, Russian (Scythian) links. It is obvious that old Abraham was busy worshipping the god Ash. and it becomes increasingly possible that later Moses set up a similar version of the mountain storm god. Much of this is normally obscured by Christian selective reading and interpretation of the Bible, and of course by careful translation. The fact remains that the true identity of the gods of both Abraham and Moses is probably not those which one popularly imagined. Alright, well, I hope you enjoyed that. There's mountains of stuff, and it's really fascinating. If people enjoy this, please leave some comments, let me know, and I'll put some more up in this format. Say, well, getting everything typed up and arranged, and more books. And as you know, proceeds we're helping to support Wilson and Blackett in their old age as well. They never got the recognition and support for the work, and we're doing our best to get it out there, and 2019 make it the breakout year. So I look forward to seeing your feedback and what you think of that, and there'll be more coming very soon. So from me, God bless.